asked me something and I was like, I don't know the answer to this. A scientist would probably know. And they were like, oh, can we ask a scientist? And I was like, do you guys want to write a letter to NASA? And I was like still writing on the board. And they're like, oh, can we do that? And I'm like, yeah, like, of course. Of course we can do that. So they were like very shocked, like especially because like one of my students was not expecting a response at all. And I had already been warned, like when I was in class, I had already been warned the day we were having this activity that don't do that thing where you tell a friend to like write responses and pretend to be NASA. And I'm like, okay, so like no, like everyone's a cynic here. And I'm like, okay, so like when they got their response, I like handed them their letters and like so I made it look all official, like they got like brown envelopes and all of that. And then they were like, but this is your handwriting. And I'm like, no, open the letter and see what's inside it. So they opened the letter and there was like this moment of stunned silence for a while where they're just like, in one day, they responded to us in one day. Like, how did this happen in one day? I thought it would at least take a year. And I'm like, no, like, so, and then they were like, they went home and they looked up all these people who had responded to them. And then, like, ma'am, I've like, so Hania and Anavia were like, miss, we've made plans to like hang out on Sunday and learn about NASA. And like, and Ryan was like, I knew from day one you were my favorite teacher. And I'm like, thank you. I was like, I knew when you took our first class that you were my favorite teacher. I'm like, okay. And then, like students now, it's not just like in the moment, but now students, like, for example, Alicia was very, very shy prior to all of this. Muhammad was very shy before all of this. Muhammad was shy enough to not even send a question. So he was very enthusiastic about like getting a response, but he never sent in a question. So Alicia like raises her hands and like she's okay with asking questions. She doesn't feel like has to pretend that like she understands everything. So even when she's struggling in class, she raises her hands and she asks questions because she knows like it'll get a good response. So like I've seen Muhammad start laughing now and be a little more mischievous in class, and like I don't even tell him to like shush anymore because I'm like this is after so long he's doing something. So like so it's not even just in the moment, it's like built their confidence enough for them to feel like they can ask questions and they can have their questions answered, and it's okay to not know things and it's okay to struggle, and all of them are here to learn. So now like when I ask a question, it's not like no one responds until they know what they're saying is right. Like all of them try to participate. Okay, so with like every kid getting a response was like my stance on this was either no one gets a response or every child gets one. It's not like a few kids get a response and then others don't. So, and for me, it was like if no one gets a response, I'll honestly like because I already told the children that to keep their expectations low. Like even before I put it up and like after I put it up, I told them that it is entirely possible we might not get a response, right? So just keep your expectations low. So that wasn't a thing I was scared of. I wasn't scared of like what will I tell them if I don't have an answer tomorrow. Because I think like the idea of like telling kids to keep their expectations low for me came from the same place where the idea of taking their questions seriously came, in the sense that they're intelligent individuals who understand like limitations and who understand the opportunities we have. So as much right as you have to ask a question, you also need to ask that with the humility of maybe I will not get a response on this. Right? And they'd understand both those aspects. So like the idea of telling kids you can't ask this question and the idea of like telling them, oh yes, you will definitely get a response comes from the same place or infantilizing them where you're just like they just don't understand. They just don't understand neither, like like they don't understand what the question they're asking is, so they won't understand the answer, and they just don't understand that the world doesn't work in a way that is not serving them constantly, so they won't understand. That's not true. Like children understand that like I mean all of them had like low expectations. None of them were actually expecting like NASA to respond.
Mm.
Uh, and but like the thing was, if one of them gets a response, then I knew that I would not share this with the class, with the names of the kids who got a response. At the same time, I'll make sure I'll like email friends who are like in grad schools abroad in a science program, whatever, and I'll email like all these other questions. I'll be like, just ask your instructor to give me a response to these questions that are left. Because I was like, then like children need to know that like all of them were important enough to get a response, right?
Mm.
So it's not like, so either no one gets a response and then we have this very honest conversation with the class where it's just like, it's okay, sometimes we don't like have an answer. And but if one of them gets an answer, then we work hard to make sure that every child knows that their journey, like their educational journey, is just as important to in the larger context of things as like the person next to them. We owe our next generation to give them like a healthier, happier world. Like this idea that, oh, just because we were punched as kids, we have to punch you as kids because this is some rite of passage. No, just because you were punched as kids, you know what that feels like. And you need to make sure that is not something that happens to the kids coming after you. Like it's not a rite of passage. It's not like just because we were treated badly, we have to like pass it on to the next generation because they need. The idea is to build a world where it's just happier and healthier, and it's like like and redefine what success looks like. So like why is a participation trophy such an embarrassing thing to have? Like why isn't just being somewhere and doing something and experiencing something a win? Why does it have like like for me, like writing to NASA for these kids would have been a win. They didn't have to get a response. It's great that they got one, but like just because like it's not like next time they try to do something I'd just be like, oh no, we only do something if you're guaranteed we'd get a win. No, we do something anyway. And like sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and that's just the way of the world. But like for you to be like discouraged from doing things, or for you to be mocked for being somewhere and being appreciated for being there, is just so bizarre to me. Like it's just like like why do you want to carry forth that bitterness when you can like when you owe like your next generation to a happier world? Like that's the point. You improve with time. You were given a world
And I
by
feel
your parents, and your job is to improve that world and give it to your children. And that's the only way we can make it better. Twitter, I just feel like unlike like Instagram or like Facebook, so I've stopped using Instagram, but like Instagram requires effort. Like Instagram requires some participant effort in the sense that you have to put up a picture. The feed has to look pretty to attract like audiences. Like you have to curate it in a certain sense. Twitter is just 280 characters, one out of the other. You can say whatever, and everyone's like forced to read it. So it requires very little effort, right? For you to gather following. So, and like with Twitter, what happens is because like Twitter is also center for like political activity more than any other like platform. It's just there are like especially in this country, there's just so much anger and bitterness and frustration, and it's just like all of that kind of comes on Twitter and just like comes out in the most vicious way possible. So even with like 9 year olds, like I did get a response from someone that was weirdly hateful. And I did like very angrily shut it down because I was like, the least you can do is leave 9 year olds alone. Like they've done nothing to you. Like we can be kinder to 9 year olds. They're not responsible for the frustrations we carry in our lives. And like I was pleasantly surprised at the fact that people kind of like understood that, like more people understood that, and they were like, dude, how bitter, like, do you have to be to like shit on 9 year olds? But like, so that it's not like that didn't happen. That happened. It was just quick shut down very, very quickly by a lot of people. And also because everyone was so done with their own frustrations that they saw like a good thing happening and they kind of just like, you know, came on to enjoy that ride and see where that will go. But so that was like a thing. So yeah, I mean Twitter is toxic. Twitter is also like Twitter is where like a lot of like Twitter is like this escape for like a lot of people. Where
mm,
like like पूरे दिन की भड़ास आके वो ट्विटर पे निकल जाती है कि because you can speak about, you can say whatever and get away with it. Like it's easier to like type something behind a keyboard than look someone in the eye and say the same thing to them. So, you know, yeah, so Twitter is toxic. So I'm glad this happened and like something good came out of it.
Did it restore your faith? Like completely? या अभी भी है
Oh
वो
no
faith?
no, I still have that. Like the school sent me like a picture of like a video of a student thanking NASA, and right before I came to this interview, I uploaded that video, and then I deleted it, and I like I'll go to school tomorrow, and I'll tell them, look, Twitter can be very toxic. Let's not put her on Twitter. Let's put her on Instagram instead. So yeah, so like I'm still like yeah, so it's not like my faith is restored, but like it was a good moment that happened, and that shouldn't